towards keeping kids in the home and providing the services. And in fact, the federal government tells us you have to make those efforts first before you take the child out of the home. And if we don't do that, then the courts will basically slap our hands and say, no, you can't do that.
So now that you have mentioned about the school, what if the parent approaches the school for a special education or related service and the school determines the child is not eligible and the child spends most of the time in the school?
I will tell
So
you.
at that point, will DSS team with the parent to fight the school district?
Well, actually, no, because there is, remember I said earlier, that has to be a relationship for DSS to be involved, which is the parent, guardian, custodian, or caretaker. And the school, unfortunately, doesn't fall within that category. But there is an organization, and I can get you that information. It's called Council for Children's Rights, and it's an organization that is in Charlotte. It's a nonprofit. They have attorneys, and they work with kids in that type of situation, and they will educate parents on how to access those types of specialized services within the school, and I can get you that information.
The number for that's actually on the back of
Okay,
the
cool.
yellow card.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So we all partner together, work together.
I want to add to that because I get that complaint a lot from my parents. You know, they get upset that their child needs services, but then the school denies it. I think it's important to understand that the school provides services for the child when it comes in the way of the learning, right? So if the child has a disability or any kind of medical condition or that interferes with the child being able to learn and meet the academic goals, that's what the school's going to help them with, right? Sometimes that may not be enough. Sometimes the child needs more than what they can receive at school. So the school cannot be, they cannot meet all the need. They can only do so much. And there are lots of parent advocacy organizations which parents can team with, and they can also talk to the school board if they feel like it's not enough or if the service is not available. There are lots of agencies that help them, and you can get those services in the community too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. It's pretty related to her question. And do parents have the right to refuse treatment if they do feel that the treatment that is being suggested is not something that they want to follow, or they want to go for alternative treatments or anything like that?
I guess, like she said before, it all depends. I would say if it's some kind of treatment where the child needs that treatment to either stay healthy or prevent injury, further injury or illness, I would say that is something that you should abide by, because then you can fall into the realm of neglect if you don't seek proper treatment.
Thank you.
One other thing I wanted to add was, like I said before, there's the DSS investigation and there's also a police investigation whenever we have to respond for certain types of things. But I guess some people are confused sometimes when, if we decide not to, file charges against someone for a crime, that doesn't mean that DSS's case is going to be closed. Sometimes our case will either be inactive or closed, but their case will remain open because they have certain reasons why they need to keep their case open. And our job is basically to determine if a crime happened, and if a crime happened and we have probable cause to prove that crime happened, then we seek charges and our case is closed. And then it goes through the court system and we deal with it at a later time in the court. But DSS has a responsibility for making sure, the family's abiding by certain things. So I just want to make sure that everyone understood that.
Hi, I have a couple of questions. If a lot of people have questions, I can just ask one and ask the other one later. But before I ask the question, I want to say I used to work in Ohio SACWIS. Child welfare, I built the SACWIS system for Ohio. And as part of building that, it was a very learning process for me. I saw so many incidents, it was very appalling to see kind of things that parents would do to their children. So, first of all, I want to thank all of you in the panel. You guys deserve a lot of credit for having to see this day in and day out. That can't be easy. Okay, to see children that are burned, children that are in various situations that are, that's got to be a very difficult job to do. So a round of applause for all of you. Okay, so, and I was a little bit confused when I got the meeting invite on, why are we talking about parents' rights here as opposed to, should be talking about what the rights of these kids are, and I really appreciate Shakthi putting this together, and and giving this kind of exposure to this. But I really want people to start thinking about, what is this, because we are brought up in a different culture, different way of doing things, right? And I'm pretty sure all of us are in best interest. The thing that really brought us to here is they took the child away, right? That's a big thing, taking my child away, how can they do that? But think about, the situation, what happened, and also think about other things. So that, again, I don't want to be on a soapbox here. Let me get to my questions. This was something that my wife and I experienced a few years ago in Ohio. We had a close friend of ours. Her husband was beating her up. So this is something we have seen in India, it's a common theme in most soap operas in India, where husband beats up the wife, right? And this, very close friend of ours, she confided with my wife. In fact, one time, he beat her up so bad, we were like 50 minutes away, we ran to their house, I dragged him out for a game of pool, and she was very insistent that we cannot tell her husband because he could, send her back to India right away and he will take the child away. She was like, if you want me to tell you these things, you cannot tell my husband about it. But there was one incident where we had to go in and intervene. She didn't know we were coming, but we were there, But we were like, what is our responsibility here? What we should have done? I always look back at that incident and think, is he still beating her? What's going on over there? So appreciate any feedback on that.
I'll jump in here. No, you did the right thing. I mean, if there's violence going on actively, we would say call 911, call police then. But as far as listening to her and letting her talk, and also if she decides to prosecute later and go to the police, then at least she's told somebody along the way what's been going on. So at the risk of injury to yourself, I would say probably call 911 would maybe have been the better option, but it's not wrong to intervene and keep it from going further. So you did the right thing.
Just continuation on this one. On the domestic violence, we have some questions too. Is it relational with the immigration services? Like if something happens and then if you do a complaint about a neighbor, is there a visa or something that will be impact on this one? Because of this domestic violations?
Are you asking if...
Yeah, for the immigration services.
I can help you. She's asking about TV.
That's what that
Okay, there are a lot of cases that we come across, okay, where the husband is an abuser, okay, but the wife is reluctant to make a complaint to a police because she is worried that his visa status might be revoked and that they will be sent back to India. So she wanted to know, do you inform the, do you do anything related with the visa?
We don't have any interaction with
Immigration services.
his immigration. We wouldn't have anything to do with that, whether or not they would see it on his application or how far along. We don't personally inform them. And there's also, like she said, visas that are available to victims of crimes here. So then she would have options to apply for that here. And I've had victims that have done that. It takes time, but it works.
Because in recent days we hear even we get a speeding ticket that affects our immigration. So that kind of things we are hearing. We are not sure is it true
Maybe
or
they're
not.
checking, but we don't provide them that information.
Okay.
Yeah, along those lines, I have another question here. Let's say the woman is in a dependent visa, okay, and the husband is working. And if the wife files a domestic violence complaint, will her visa status be affected? Because she's dependent on the husband. Now she files a case against her husband, who is really feeding her. He's the breadwinner of the family, and he's taking care of the kids. If she makes a complaint against him, then she's really worried where she can stay and what will happen to her kids.
Well, as far as the visa, I can't answer that. That would be an immigration question. But there are a lot of resources that are available to victims, assistance with protection orders, with shelters, with short-term housing, with counseling, with taking care of your kids, with including that if you needed a protective order, all those things. So there's help available.
Okay, we would like to know more about the resources available
About what?
to help.
Yeah,
So for the
there's
victims.
a purple pamphlet, there's a pile of them over there, and there's literally a list on the back of every single resource. So we're very lucky in this county that there are a lot of resources available. But there's DV shelters, there's organizations that will help the victim fill out protection orders, like a restraining order. There's counseling, I mean, it's endless. Pretty much anything you would need, there's help for. There's help for that. There should be ones in English too, so.
Yeah, he has
Should
them.
be both, okay.
Yeah, he has them.
I would like to answer Vidya's question. There is an agency called Safe Alliance, which really offers help for the domestic violence victims. They have a 24 hours hotline, no holidays, they work all the 24 hours answering your concerns, and specialized advocates will be assigned to the victims. They help people with shelter, developing a safety plan, and they really prepare the victims. And they have a protocol, and the anonymity is maintained very well. And they also help with the visa assistance for the domestic violence victims. And one interesting feature is such a victim can apply for the visa without even telling the husband anything. She can still remain in the same household. She can process her visa once everything is settled in place, and then she can walk straight in front of him and she can walk out. They also provide accommodation for the children, very well taken care, and they also offer career assistance. There are so many programs involved. Once somebody decides to step out, the county is ready to help. But nobody can tell somebody to get out. They cannot help anybody who is not willing to help themselves.
Yeah, thanks, that's informative. Do you want to announce about yourself?
I'm Rohini. I have my bachelor's in dentistry from India. After moving here, stuck up with my dependent status, and then I found happiness in being an advocate. That was another way of bringing smiles to people. I am a certified North Carolina family partner. I'm working on my national certification, and we have a small group of families with special needs. We actively help them with Union County CMS, Folkmel, and sometimes we also offer tele-advice in all the other states. Thank you.
She's been very good.
Thank you, Roshni. I wanted to just tell you all, like, she is the one, the initiator of this event. So we can.
I've heard, like, how the discipline and where is the thin line where we might be crossing the thin line. So the way we were disciplined in India was completely different the way, it's required here, or there are some rules around what you can or what you cannot do. I have heard like few things that what can be called as an abuse. Is there anywhere that we can go and read in detail what can be called as an abuse? We are trying, sometimes it's all work pressures and everything that's going on. So it's not that we really want, at least majority of the parents really don't want to hurt their child. But many things are happening in daily life that it gets on you, and sometimes you just lose it. So, but if you read through something and then it's there in the back of the mind, it will be really painful, like for a really affectionate parent that the child is being taken away from them. To take, like to handle that is more painful. So if we have already in the back of our mind, okay, this is what is your limit. You shouldn't be in any case do that. That will be helpful. So somewhere that where we can go and read through what is that thin line that we should never cross.
And again, you can Google that with North Carolina Department of Social Services, and you can put the Child Protective Services. Actually, if I could email you something or with the laws, if that would help, and you could pass it out and forward it. That would be great. But there is, there is a difference between well, when I was growing up and discipline that I received and now, but the big thing is, parents can still physically discipline their children, just don't leave marks on them, and, be careful, it's, like I said, it's more helpful to, be hit, don't use physical discipline, let it be on the buttocks, refrain from the head, the body, because that can cause serious injury, but, I can get your email or something and send you something.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you. Yeah, that will be very helpful.
I want to say, from a legal perspective also, it also depends on the age of the child. Because what you do to a 3-year-old, if you do the same thing to an 18-year-old, for a 3-year-old, that's abuse. For like not an 18-year-old, but maybe a 16-year-old, it could be neglect. So a lot depends. You have to look, we take into account the age of the child, where the injury is, what type of injury, why are you doing something? Because if you decide, you may not even hit the child, but if you may, like for instance, I know sometimes some people will make a child stand in the corner with one leg up to correct behavior. How long are you doing that? So when the social worker gets those types of referrals, they'll go out and ask those types of questions. Because even if you use like some type of extreme behavior to modify a child's behavior, that can be abusive also. So a lot of it depends on the circumstances surrounding the child, and that's what the social worker is going to go out and investigate. But they do look at the age of the child, what type of behavior it is, what are you trying to correct, how long you're doing it, whether or not it leaves marks, how long the marks are on the child. Those are the types of factors that we look at to make that determination as to whether or not you cross the line from inappropriate discipline to abuse.
And I can actually, I'm in intake, and we have a manual that we go by, and I could send that to you. That would be very helpful. And I just wanted to say one other thing about the domestic violence. We receive about 450 reports a month for domestic violence. That was very brave of y'all to be involved and to try to get help for your friend. One thing that I've been involved with several fatalities that have involved domestic violence, and one thing that we find in just about every fatality is that somebody knew this woman or man was being abused by the spouse and they didn't tell. So it takes a brave person to do that, but it's very important to make that call to the police and to DSS about the domestic violence. Because what we see also is children intervene to stop the parent from being abused, and then they get hit or harmed. So, but you're very brave.
Yeah, just to add on to the list from the questions, like how about yelling on the kids in the public places? Can we do that? Can we?
Is it considered abuse?
Yelling at kids.
Yelling at
Strong voice.
Well, I mean, mom and dad yelled at me, but parents, they have the right to yell. And we do get those referrals sometimes where parents are yelling at the children and like that. But then it goes to the point of emotional abuse. When you say something that is going to cause the child to have serious emotional damage, where they might require mental health treatment. Like I said today, we had a parent that just kept using very foul language towards their child, and the child wanted to commit suicide. And we took that for emotional abuse. So, we recognize that parents yell. There's stress.
Just to clarify, these are not Maria's questions. The questions that people have written to us and we have compiled them.
yeah, I told them.
Now, what is the boundary of that mental abuse? Is there a boundary, or is there what all the things are considered as mental abuse?
Well, that's when we're going back to the emotional abuse, where we talk about serious emotional damage.
Okay.
A child wanting to kill themselves because a parent keeps calling them fat and says you're useless and I wish you were never born. and they're exhibiting a lot of anxiety, self-harm. We've had children that have been cutting on themselves due to the statements the parents make towards the children.
Okay.
And we usually, when that happens, when we get to these emotional abuse cases, we usually talk to mental health professionals too and get their opinions. But when we get those cases, we always meet with the parents and kind of talk to them about what's going on. Because, we do want children to remain in the home. A lot of people think, well, just take these children out of the home and put them in a foster home. That's not the best place for a child. A child needs to be with their family.
Thank you.
If it's safe, if it's safe to be so.
So as far as assigning a legal guardian to a child, as parents, what are the basic norms that we need to follow? Do they necessarily have to be a citizen or blood relative? Because I know an incident where the parents would know more and literally the child had to be foster kids and they didn't know how to, have the kids be assigned to a guardian who was being a non-citizen, because most of us have kids over here who are citizens, but basically our close families back in our hometown. So I just want to know the norms and what's the process to assign a legal guardian to a child over here.
In North Carolina, in order for a child to have a guardian, both parents have to be deceased for a Chapter 35 guardian. In juvenile court, if the court, and it's just something that is created strictly in juvenile court, if a child has a guardian out of juvenile court, that is based on a court order. And that guardian basically stands in the role of the parent. They can make decisions for that particular child, but that child would have been in foster care. And so that's how you get a guardian in that sense. Parents can go to Chapter 50 court, which is family court, and they can give custody back and forth to another person or to the other parent. But you have to also remember, if you're looking at giving custody to someone who is not a biological parent, in order for a court to do that, that court has to find that that biological parent has acted inconsistent with their right to raise a child. Because remember what I said originally, biological parents, have that right to raise their child. They have a right to the care, custody, and control of their child. And in order to take that away, you have to show that they're acting inconsistent. So I hope that answers your question, does it?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. And do they necessarily have to be a citizen?
For DSS, we do not ask about citizenship. We don't do that. In Chapter 50 in family court, I do not believe that they ask about citizenship either.
Okay. And where is the best resource we could find related to this, in order to assign a legal guardian?
Okay, so remember what I said. If you're wanting a guardian for a particular child, that means that neither of the parents are alive. So that's in special proceedings, which if you go down to the Mecklenburg County Courthouse, that's on the third floor, and there's paperwork for that. But if you go onto the general statutes, if you go into Chapter 35, those requirements are listed there. If you are looking, if it's a guardian where a child has been in foster care, that's in the juvenile code, which is in Chapter 7B, and it's 7B 600, which lists the duties of the guardian.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions?
Related question to what she asked. Did you say if both the parents are deceased, then if you don't have a legal guardian already assigned, can a relative, like an uncle or someone, raise a child? Or do you have to have a documentation or kind of a living will, if you want to call it, that's stating that there is somebody could be a legal guardian after you're deceased?
If a child doesn't have parents and both the parents are deceased, someone has to have legal custody of that child because that person needs to be able to make decisions for that child. A lot of times you can't get insurance, you can't get that child in school, you can't make any type of decisions unless you have some type of legal relationship to that particular child. So it's best, like if a child, we have a lot of cases, unfortunately, where either, a parent kills another parent and then kills himself or herself. And so that leaves that child, so that child is dependent as far as we're concerned. And so what we'll do is we'll file for custody because somebody has to be able to make decisions, like if a child needs to go to therapy, if that child needs to have surgery or whatever that child needs, somebody needs to have a legal relationship to be able to provide for the needs of that child. So if a parent is deceased, we'll either try to work with relatives to try to either help them either get guardianship, or if we have to take custody, then have the court give them custody. We do try to work with relatives because what our statute says is that children should be with their families. We have to consider family first unless it's not in the child's best interest to be there. So we do try to work with relatives first if they come about.
Along that line, people create the revocable living trust. So if something happens to me, can I name one of my friends as a legal guardian if something happens to me? What is the document that would allow me to specify who?
Some people have done that in their will.
Oh, you can.
And then you go to special proceedings, which is on the 3rd floor of the courthouse.
Does it have to be registered at the courthouse?
That's where you're going to get the guardianship paperwork from, at the courthouse.
While I'm alive and...
No, you can't get guardian. While you're alive, you still have the right to do whatever, to make those decisions for your child. But in the event that something happens to you, you can make arrangements for the care of your child.
But when I'm conscious and alive, can make a good decision?
Yeah, you can
I name if something happens to me?
You can do like a power of attorney or something like that for somebody to care for your child.
Okay.
Yeah, I would recommend that. I don't know if many Indian parents do that. I think
It's always a good idea to work on a living will and identify the persons that will take care of your child in the event that you die.
Okay, it goes in the living will.
Yeah, I think you have to find an attorney and do it. And there are some online people too, but depending upon if you want to do a trust and things like that, it's always a good idea to get that done. Especially for someone like us, because most of our families live in India.
So that is called the living will, not the power of attorney.
Living will, I'm not.
So maybe you can answer that.
So in case it's not like the parents are deceased, but we don't have any relatives here, but it's like so uncertain world. We are always thinking, okay, what if something happens to both of us? Like not at the same time, but something happens, we always want to think, where will our kids go? So if we want to plan ahead of time, as you said, maybe it is not guardianship that we can give when we are living. So what is that we can assign somebody to, saying, okay, in case we are not there, this is the person who can take any decisions about my child. So what is that legal term that what is that we have to set up to get our child taken care of if we are not there?
So I'm very cautious because I can't give you legal advice. But what we have done in situations is that some parents have completed power of attorneys that say that people can go and go make decisions for my child. However, you need to check because sometimes, if your child is enrolled in CMS or if they're going to a particular doctor or something like that, there's the school may or may not take a power of attorney. The doctor may or may not take a power of attorney. So you have to really know what it is that you're doing and what kind of arrangements you're making for your particular child to make sure that the person that you want to be able to care for your child has that ability to do that. Does that make sense?
Can I give that power of authority to my parent who is not a citizen of USA?
Yes.
You
I can
can.
give anyone.
I know.
Yeah,
you can do
that. But it'll be much more easy for someone here to do that in the event something happens to us because they cannot be contacting them in India and things like that.
My permission we don't want to give it to them for temporary. They can
you pass on the mic,
your
please?
situation, then hand it over to grandparents. How can we do that?
I don't know.
And then
I think those
I'm
are.
asking,
if anybody can help.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what your question was.
Yeah. We are staying here and our parents are in India. If something happened to us, so for taking care of here legally, so we can give power of attorney here, and later we want to switch it to our parents. So how can we do that? Because they can't, if they come also, they don't know how to handle legal affairs here. So can we do something for temporary, they can take care of here, later we can hand it over to grandparents or living sisters or brothers in India?
I guess I'm not really understanding your question, because if you're giving somebody power of attorney and then they're
because they are staying here.
I know you can always revoke the power of attorney and give it to somebody different. You can change your mind how many other times you want.
But if she's not available,
If they are not there, so how does procedure will go?
So if you're not,
Like if something accident happens, so we want to take care of our kid, so for instant, immediate relief, because we want to give here, because they know the legal what can they do take the legal help here. So later we want to give it to our family, the kids custody. How can we do that?
I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but we did power of attorney and living will for our children. So you identify a number of people.
Okay.
And it's almost like, you identify which one would be the first in the event that they cannot do it. You can do that.
Okay. But
I don't think that's what she's asking.
So she's saying, till the parents in India can step in and do it, if you want to know, we can assign it to somebody local.
Because they don't know anything here legally, how to approach, whom to approach.
Then
Because
it
they
might
are
be a
not
good
aware
idea
of
to
things.
just keep it with who's here. I think you should probably I'm not sure if I answered your question, I could have been wrong, but you may need to contact like a lawyer and ask those questions.
Yeah.
But there are lots of, there are ways where you can do it that way.
Yeah. Thank you.
What happens if two kids in a home, like two brothers, get into fight and one get hurt? What happens?
Brothers fight, and one of them first the other one gets
brothers?
The siblings.
Kids fight.
Kids fight.
Brother and sister, brother.
You just let them
They
fight.
That's not DSS issue.
The only time, and we have got,
If one gets hurt, what will happen? What are the consequences?
well, and we have received those kind of calls before, and we look then as what is the parent doing to intervene to make sure the one child is safe, especially if it's a case where this is an ongoing thing and one child keeps getting hurt, then DSS is going to get involved because there's obviously improper supervision. We've had cases where a child has had mental health issues and they're very aggressive, and that child is left to babysit a younger sibling, and they'll beat that child up. Well, we may get involved because, it's not appropriate to have this one child that has these aggressive behaviors to babysit. So we have to look at, what is the parent doing to protect.
And I would say, as a rule of thumb for you guys, I would ask, how are my actions impacting my child? Because that's what DSS does. How is the parent's actions impacting that child? Are the parent's actions harming that particular child? And also in a situation like that, when you have two brothers that are fighting, that's probably a case that we're also going to refer to law enforcement to.
If I can add to that.
Like even as a mandated reporter, when I call, their final question is, what are you hoping to achieve by making this call? What is your concern? And what are you afraid might happen, right? So you have to have a reason, because there are some disgruntled neighbors that will call and make up reasons. So you should have a valid reason why you're calling, or have a serious concern about the safety of the child.
I have a question about 504 plan.
So I understand that if the kid is really sick or if the kid needs support in the school, so I understand that school have to come up with a plan called 504, right? So,
yeah, the IEP is the individual educational plan, and then the 504 plan almost is like a lighter version of it.
Okay.
So a 504 plan is if a child needs accommodations. Like for example, they have a medical condition and they have to go and get some medications at the nurse's office, or they broke their arm and they need certain accommodations, and so they're not able to function and learn like they need to. So there are some accommodations that are in place.
right, and also if the kid cannot be maybe like play with other kids, maybe for example, if a kid undergone some eye surgery and returning to the school with the doctor's advice saying that he need to be really careful, right? So at that time he cannot definitely play outside with the kids. That might cause infection or anything.
Right.
So in that case, I believe that school is supposed to provide some plan for the kid before he come to the school. But I am hearing that not many of the schools they are offering that. So is it something that the mandatory that every school have to offer, or it is just optional for the school? Is it parent we have to enforce for that?
Yes, I think she wants to add to that, but I can answer that later too. I know they may.
As a special education advocate, I would like to say this question has to be addressed to your school principal. You have to write a written request to the school principal, and the school is mandated to reply back to you and call you for a meeting within 30 days.
And before the child get into the school, right?
Yeah, and it depends on the incident, what kind of medical condition. You always have to make a written request. If it is not written, it did not happen.
Okay.
Make a written request, and then the principal is held responsible within 30 days. He has to call you for a meeting and make a decision whether the child will qualify for a 504 plan or not.
I think the initial most important thing is that, does the child have a condition and do they need it? And
If the child has a condition that needs it, right? There are lots of parents that will ask us because it starts off with a diagnosis from a medical physician should say, this is the condition, these are the challenges that child has, and these are the accommodations we would direct. I mean, some people ask accommodations for, like I had a parent that wanted the child to have essential oils in the nurse's office to calm down. That's not going to happen, and I'm not going to recommend that. But if a child is having severe anxiety attacks and they need to go to a quiet place to calm down, or to the nurse's office to get a medication, that's different. So so that's why you have to have a diagnosis. The child should have some challenges that gets in the way of them being able to function in school, and then the accommodations.
Okay, thank you. So it is completely optional to the school, and they can make a decision on it.
Right. Even as physicians, I can ask. They determine if it's something that they can do, if it's necessary or not. It's a team approach. Okay. Just because I write doesn't mean they have to give. But if they see that it's valid, they would not usually do it.
Thank you. We are on to the last question for the officers before we let you go. We had a couple of parents who said their children were threatening them. Yes, it is. It's a true fact. We had some parents who wrote to us, said a mom was trying to get her kid to do homework, and the kid refused to and said, if you keep harassing me, I'm going to call the cops on you. So the moms are worried about how this would go, how this would play out.
Give them the phone and go, here you go.
I mean, as police officers, we don't just look at the one side. It's not always the case when the person that calls 911 is the right person in that situation. Sometimes we have people that are doing the wrong thing calling police because they want to get ahead, jump ahead, and try to make it look like they're the victim. But with children, I mean, just as long as I wouldn't say that that's harassment if that's what your question is.
Yes.
No, I mean, telling your child to do their homework is just being a parent, and doing proper punishment if that child is going to disobey you. I mean, as a parent, you have that right.
As long as they're not doing a physical abusive punishment, right?
I mean, like DSS said, I mean, you can do physical discipline if you choose to do that, but you also got to take into account, like they said, like age. I mean, as a teenager, you're not going to spank a teenager because they're not doing their homework. You got to do something. I would say, you know, there's all the other alternatives like taking their phone away or not letting them go out with friends, you know, things like that.
But they're calling that is also abuse because they need it for the high school. When their school closed, they're in a club. They don't know anybody to call or contact us. So they said, it is the emergency, you need to give us a cell phone. You can't, you know.
I mean, that's the thing. It always comes down to you or the parent. If your kid's saying, oh, I need a cell phone for this reason, you have to give it to me.
How to ground the kids.
No, cell phone is a privilege. You earn your privilege.
Exactly.
Yes, but no, once the school closed, he's in a club. He's outside. They're running on the woods.
There are other kids with cell phones. There are
Well,
kids with
I mean, like I said, there's other alternatives. You can buy a basic cell phone where it's just used for emergency purposes, you know, like all it can do is send text or call numbers. I mean, there's those options, you know, you go to Walmart and find a basic phone where they don't have access to the internet and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So that's another thing I want to mention to everyone here is, you know, if you have teenagers that have access to cell phones, make sure you're looking at what your kids are doing. Make sure you observe what websites they're going to, what applications they're using, who they're talking to. Look through their pictures, see if they're taking, you know, pictures that they're not supposed to be taking or receiving. You know, you know, there's a lot of predators out there on the internet, and they're targeting children specifically, and they'll do anything they can to get that child to send pictures, or you know, they'll threaten the child, you know, I'll hurt your family, or you know, things like that. So that's an important thing. Just be monitoring what your kid's doing on the internet, on the computer, tablet, phone, you know, things like that.
On this yellow card too, on the back of number 24 is a parent's stress line. And so that's a line that you can actually, if you're dealing with things like that, you can call numbers like that are on this yellow sheet and just tell them, you know, the troubles you're having with trying to figure out the best way of disciplining or something like that. They're there to help. Also, she mentioned Safe Alliance earlier. They have a hotline specifically for that stuff now. So, I don't know that the Safe Alliance number's on here, but I know that it's on the paperwork for DV.
Yeah, to further answer your question about if your child calls police because they feel like you're harassing them for not doing their homework. I mean, police are going to go out there and do an investigation. They're going to talk to the child. They're going to talk to the parent. And I would like to say that we're pretty good at sifting through, you know, the BS and figuring out if what they're saying is, you know, true or if they're, you know.
Mine's are high schoolers. I'm not worried about that.
In my opinion, I don't think parents ground their kids enough, you know, but, you know, because that's how kids get spoiled and start behaving that way. Just pay attention to who they're friends with, too, you know. So.
I would like to ask one last question, sorry. Adding another one. Because so many women wanted to know the answer for this question. If the spouse is an abuser, wife is reluctant to call 911, fearing that the children will be taken away from her. Is that the case?
And as I said, we receive about 450 of those kind of reports a month. What we do is when we get those referrals, we try to call the victim, you know, usually it's the mom, and try to talk to her privately away from the abuser. Our goal is then to come up with some kind of safety plan for you, and for you to protect you and your children. We don't automatically remove the children. I think, I can't remember who it was said, that, you know, sometimes the abuser likes to say, well, you'll lose your children if you tell. Well, that's not necessarily the truth. What we try, I mean, if the children are at imminent risk, but we try to work with the victim on getting her services, like through Safe Alliance. There's counseling also in schools for children that have witnessed domestic violence. There's I think it's called the HERO program. It's for children that have witnessed domestic violence. So we don't automatically remove the children. Again, it takes a lot to remove a child from the home. but we're wanting to work with you, the victim, privately, and we want to interview the children privately too. So that's not our goal.
And even if, I was gonna say, but DSS will work with victims and we recommend services, but if the victim chooses not to engage in those services, then at that point, DSS will have to have some conversations about what's best for the children. So if people are involved in those types of relationships, we encourage them to work with DSS to seek out the counseling, because we will work with you to get you to a safe place and also protect the children.
And we also, try to get the bad or services too.
Thank you.
Yeah, if the children are very shy, whatever that happened outside, bad things. So how can we deal with this kind of situation?
Like if something bad happens in the
around outside, they are not ready to share with their parents. So how can we deal with this kind of situation?
I thought we'll discuss that. I think those are the questions we were going to do after they're done with their part. I just wanted
To say something, I know this whole thing started because of that case in Florida. I don't know all the details as well, but I can say that, especially in the Indian community, there's so much misconceptions about what law enforcement does or DSS does. They look at and it's not just with the Indian community, I see people from all races in my work. I know parents that, I see children with bruise and I can tell that the parent has coerced the child to say something different. So I think we need to understand that law enforcement or DSS, they are our advocates, I think